In the early 17th century, the island at the mouth of the Hudson River was a shifting frontier, a wilderness of tidal marshes and ancient forests known to the Lenape people as Mannahatta. This was a land of quiet trade routes and wooded shores, but the arrival of Henry Hudson in 1609 changed its trajectory forever. What began as a modest European foothold quickly drew the eyes of merchants and rival empires, opening a door to a century of relentless ambition and cultural collision. By 1626, the Dutch West India Company had established a permanent presence. In a deal that remains one of history's most debated exchanges, Dutch officials secured Manhattan from the Lenape for trade goods valued at 24 guilders. While the cultural understanding of land ownership differed vastly between the two groups, the agreement gave the Dutch a legal anchor. They wasted no time fortifying their claim. At the southern tip of the island, Fort Amsterdam rose, a rugged palisade of timber and earth, designed to guard the harbor and the company's precious warehouses. Building New Amsterdam was a grueling, back-breaking ordeal.
The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and the rhythmic crack of axes as settlers felled massive oaks to carve a settlement out of the brush. They dragged heavy logs through muddy lanes to raise the first gabled houses and warehouses. Life was defined by survival. Inside a typical mid-century home, families crowded into a single room warmed by a large brick hearth. Light filtered through small, lead-leaded windows, falling on rough-hewn tables and pewter dishes. Daily life followed a steady, disciplined rhythm, grinding grain, mending nets, and preparing salted meats for the long winters, all while the damp river winds whistled through the gaps in the timber walls. However, the growth of the colony had a darker, more forced foundation. By 1655, enslaved Africans were brought to the island in increasing numbers. Their labor was woven into the very fabric of the city. They built the docks, cleared the farms, and raised the stone walls. This turning point made bondage a fixed and brutal part of the early economy, a reality that stood in stark contrast to the colonists' own pursuit of prosperity. Conflict was never far away.
In 1644, after years of bloody skirmishes between the settlers and native nations, a series of fragile treaties were forged. Around council fires and makeshift tables, wampum was traded for promises of peace. It was an uneasy truce born of exhaustion rather than trust, but it allowed New Amsterdam a brief moment to breathe and expand. The Dutch era reached its climax in 1664. English warships drifted into the harbor, their guns trained on the fort. Outnumbered and politically divided, the colony offered little resistance. Peter Stuyvesant's defiant protests were ignored by citizens who favored the stability of trade over a hopeless battle. With a quiet surrender, the city passed into English hands and was renamed New York. Although the Dutch briefly reclaimed the city in 1673, renaming it New Orange for a single restless year, diplomacy eventually outpaced the cannons. The Treaty of Westminster firmly returned the colony to England, fixing its identity within the British Empire. By 1680, New York was a city in transition. The population had topped 4,000, and the skyline reflected a blend of cultures.
Steep Dutch gables and brick facades remained, but they were now joined by English sash windows and broader chimneys. The Great Dock on the East River became the city's busiest gateway, a roar of activity where sailors and merchants unloaded barrels of sugar, tobacco, and furs from across the Atlantic. At the northern edge of the settlement, a defensive timber wall stood as a reminder of the city's vulnerabilities. Running along the line that would become Wall Street, it featured the Watergate, a fortified passage where carts and travelers entered the town under watchful eyes. The city was expanding, and so was its restlessness. In 1689, following the Glorious Revolution in England, the city fell into turmoil.
a merchant named Jacob Leisler led a rebellion, seizing control of the fort as the train-band militia mustered on the commons. For a moment, it seemed the city might forge its own path, but the uprising was brief and royal authority was soon restored. As the century drew to a close in 1699, Pearl Street had become one of the busiest lanes in the province. Curving along the original shoreline, it was a place where the scent of tar and spices mingled with the river wind. New York was no longer a fragile outpost. It had become a cosmopolitan port, a crossroads of languages and ambitions. The muddy lanes of the early 1600s had given way to a bustling center of commerce, standing on the edge of a vast continent and a new century of power.